Hello, and welcome to the afternoon of day one of the Canadian Hydrogen Convention. I'm Chris McLeod with Edmonton Global, and I'm sitting here in the middle of the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub exhibit here at the conference. We've got about 3,000 people joining us from all over the world. They're here to learn about hydrogen and what's happening across our community and across this economy as we really build out the next kind of net zero or the clean energy future of this region, the province, and the world. First up this afternoon, we've got a conversation with Mark Plamondon. Mark is the Executive Director of Alberta's Industrial Heartland Association. If you don't know about the Industrial Heartland, this is where just amazing things are happening, especially in heavy industry. Some of the world's biggest energy companies have made multi-billion-dollar investments, and those investments are now growing as we move more and more into hydrogen and the net zero future. Mark, thanks so much for joining us.
Chris, fantastic to be here. Thank you. Looking forward to the conversation.
Okay, wonderful. So for those who maybe don't know about the Industrial Heartland, can you just tell us a bit about what you've got on the go?
Absolutely. Would love to talk about the Heartland. So Alberta's Industrial Heartland is a heavy industrial cluster that really is leading the energy transition and really leading the province and the country in terms of heavy industrial investment and activities. So this region, it sits in the Edmonton metropolitan region. It's in the northeast corner of the Edmonton metropolitan region, and it spans the city of Edmonton, city of Fort Saskatchewan, Strathcona County, Sturgeon County, and Lamont County. And those five jurisdictions have land in this area called Alberta's Industrial Heartland. It's 582 square kilometers of pre-zoned heavy industrial land. And since about the 1950s, actually, there's been investments in companies in this region that want to take advantage of the competitive advantages that are here to build value-add energy processing projects. So there's currently over $40 billion, around $45 billion of investment sitting in the ground.
Wow.
And the types of companies that operate here would be companies that are taking the low-cost feedstocks, natural gas and natural gas liquids feedstocks, and taking them through to value-add products. So there's investments in fractionation of natural gas into its various components, upgrading its various components to either ethylene or polyethylene or propylene and soon to be polypropylene. So taking the components of the natural gas and natural gas liquids and moving them through to value-add products. And then there's all the infrastructure, pipelines, utilities, water access, water infrastructure that's there. And all of this really leads to a strong value proposition that is attractive for new investments to come here. And so Alberta's Industrial Heartland is this cluster that is really leading the way in terms of investment in Alberta and growth going forward.
Yeah, that's really exciting. So I just want to zero in on a couple of things you said. 500 and how many?
582 square kilometers. So
Right.
It is a significant industrial cluster, and there's lots of opportunity for growth.
Yeah, and the scale of what we can do here, I think for a lot of people would just be mind-boggling.
Yeah.
So when you think about 500 plus square kilometers,
Yeah.
this is a massive space. You've got a number of huge projects already there, but there's so much room for expansion.
Absolutely. In fact, so when we tour folks around the Industrial Heartland, one, they're impressed with how much available land there is for industrial development, but also it's flat land, right? So it's flat. The amount of additional earthworks that need to be done, it would be lower than in a jurisdiction where it's maybe not as flat as we have. So that's a real advantage. But that's on the surface. Actually, subsurface has significant advantages too. And one of the reasons that we're talking a lot about hydrogen and the advantages that we have with hydrogen in the Industrial Heartland and in the Edmonton metropolitan region is the carbon capture sequestration pore space capability that's here in Alberta. And that is now, I'm going to say, a new infrastructure. The last 5-6 years, the first carbon capture sequestration project in Alberta. But that infrastructure now is an additional competitive advantage that is now going to help companies lead the way in a low-carbon future.
Yeah, and I think that's such a great point to raise. When you look at the carbon sequestration ability that we have here, and we've had it for a long time. We've really been using it for a long time. A lot of other jurisdictions are trying to figure out how to do it. We've got 20 plus years of proven technology, proven sequestration, and I think it's something like the first or second largest ability to store carbon in the world.
Yeah, my understanding is it's the second largest capability pore space. The Cambian the salt layer that can hold the carbon dioxide. So the second largest in the world, but the amount is massive. I think the Alberta Geological Survey did a study of what that sandstone formation can hold, and it's in the order of 1,000 years of current emissions. Like,
Wow.
Whether that's the exact number or not,
It's big, no matter what the number is.
It's a lot of capability for storing carbon dioxide below the surface, and so that's the point here: is that there's not only a significant amount of natural resources in the area, like decades and centuries in some cases, and then again, centuries of pore space capability. There is a lot of capability from the natural resource standpoint and the pore space standpoint.
So, and again, here in the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub, it's really bringing together, the Industrial Heartland Association, Edmonton Global, a number of municipalities, Indigenous First Nations. We're more and more pulling industry into that as well. But the piece that we've really been highlighting is this, the ability to create low emissions or low, even net zero hydrogen at a super low cost. I think we're maybe number 2 in the world in terms of low cost, and then at a global scale.
Yeah.
So, can you just talk about what's enabling those three things to really happen?
Yeah, that's a key point. I mean, at scale, countries have a lot of ambition around energy transition and being able to move energy systems as quickly as possible. In order to do that, you need to be at scale. And that's where the natural gas and making hydrogen from natural gas comes from. Like, that's where we can play with that, right? And so one of the key advantages in the industrial heartland is the access to low-cost natural gas, which is then used to make hydrogen when you're using steam methane reforming or autothermal reforming. The technology is using natural gas to hydrogen. And so having natural gas that is some of the lowest lowest cost natural gas in the world, certainly the lowest cost natural gas in North America, and some of the lowest cost in the world. So that positions you right off the top to make some of the lowest cost hydrogen. And then we add this carbon capture and sequestration capability that will now help store, in the order of 95 to 96% of the carbon dioxide emissions. So that helps create this low carbon hydrogen that is now some of the lowest cost hydrogen in the world at scale.
Yeah.
Doing this from electrolysis with water, I mean, that's another pathway to get to zero emission hydrogen. But to get to scale quickly and to try to get to a point where there's economies of scale for the consumer, utilizing low cost natural gas and carbon capture sequestration, we think, is really one of the key ways to get there.
Yeah, again, I think it's a really good point. What we need to do really to solve, the world's climate challenge is transition people as fast as they can. Yeah. And one of the ways to do that is to make it affordable. Yeah. And it's going to be a while until solar and wind and some of the other technologies will be able to really do it at cost and do it at the scale that the world needs, where you guys can do it now.
Yeah, I think, it's all part of the mix, but certainly there's all these components as part of the mix, but where we think natural gas really plays a role is you can get to scale. Yeah. The technologies are there already today. They're in service today. Hydrogen's been produced in the industrial heartland since the 1950s. The industrial base is there in the industrial heartland as consumers of hydrogen. Then as demand increases for transportation and other uses, we can really leverage off the production capability that's already there in the industrial heartland. So I think all of that economies of scale, which is already in the industrial heartland and we're positioned to grow in the industrial heartland, that all adds to the affordability. And face it, affordability is going to be a part of the conversation, and it needs to be. It needs to be.
Yeah, absolutely. We work really closely together. We focus a bit more on the demand side of hydrogen and some of the other investments around R&D and building out the finance side of emerging to a new economy. Your team really leads that production side and heavy industry. Can you talk about, again, you've got 40 plus billion already invested. What's coming next? I know you've got some big goals by 2030.
Yeah, so with our association, Alberta's Industrial Heartland Association, we are involved in marketing the region internationally to help companies figure out if their next capital investment makes sense. Yeah. And so as companies are looking to grow and they're looking around the world at jurisdictions, we want to help them understand our jurisdiction so they can make a decision as quickly as possible what's best for them. And so there's a number of companies that have announced projects and studies, some projects, but in a lot of cases they're announcing studies to look further at projects here, taking advantage of the low-cost natural gas, the carbon capture and sequestration capability here, and then all of the other, the access to fresh water, the skilled labor, the infrastructure that's here, land, all those things that we talked about. So there's a number of announcements already out, companies looking. So there are 2 world-class hydrogen through to ammonia production facilities where studies have been announced that they're looking at production of low carbon hydrogen through to low carbon ammonia for the export market. So those are 2, between those 2, those are multi-billion dollars type of investments. So that's really exciting. Again, those are studies, but we're hoping that those studies result in final investment decisions. We've had a company come out and say, look, we're going to be doing a study in the industrial heartland in the critical mineral space, looking at metallurgical refining to make a cobalt type product for the battery chain, which also helps with the decarbonization space. The largest announcement is Dow has announced that they are looking seriously in the industrial heartland for their first net zero ethylene production facility, which would be a significant investment for our region. Again, not yet a final investment decision, but Dow already is a key corporate citizen in the industrial heartland, and they are looking at doing their next thing, and they have announced publicly that they are looking seriously at the industrial heartland for the world's first net zero ethylene manufacturing facility. So you combine all these things, and you're a long ways towards our objective of an additional $30 billion in investments by 2030. Yeah. And we've talked about that before. And we want to go from, at the time we set this goal, we were a $40 billion jurisdiction. We want to get to a $70 billion jurisdiction by 2030. And so we're hopeful.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think you're underselling the Dow deal a little bit. We did a tour with U3 Industrial Heartland. They're not just an investor in your space. They've got a massive investment, huge facility. So their existing presence is really quite incredible in the heartland. And I know just from what Dow has said publicly that single project, if it goes to a final investment decision and is built, it has the capability of decarbonizing as much as 30% of their global footprint, which is just mind-boggling. Yeah. That was a gigantic company. For one project to do that is amazing.
And what's exciting for our region is, again, a company like that can put capital in many jurisdictions in the world. And they're choosing the industrial heartland and the Edmonton metropolitan region to look seriously at this investment, coupled with the current facility that's there already. It would create a massive ethylene production facility here, net zero, and a flagship. I think it would be a flagship here in the industrial heartland that is really a fantastic marketing tool and sends a signal to the world that if you want to meet your economic objectives and your environmental objectives, you can do that here.
Yeah, it's really amazing. So I think everybody is really hoping that thing goes from study to done as quick as we can. Yeah. Can you talk to maybe some of the other big investments, some of the other major players that are in the heartland, just to give people a sense of kind of who else is there?
Yeah, certainly. So, again, we have around $45 billion of investment in the region. Another exciting project that construction is finishing up and we'll be looking towards commissioning and startup is Inner Pipeline built it's around $5 billion, a complex that will take low-cost propane and value add that and upgrade that to polypropylene. And that's the first project of this type in the industrial heartland. So very exciting to see that coming online. So that's around $5 billion. So, but Inner Pipeline also has other facilities in the region. They partner with Plamondon on fractionation. Pembina is another company that's operating in the region with significant fractionation assets in the region, and they also have other activities. Shell is a major company that operates in the region. Their Scotford facility, they've announced, will be one of 5 global chemical parks that Shell will be continuing to develop in their total portfolio globally. So, a significant corporate citizen for us in the industrial heartland. Another investment in the region, NWR, recently built and is now operating a low sulfur diesel refining complex, and that was in the order of $10 billion investment.
Wow.
So the investments that are in the heartland are significant, and these are just some examples. But Dow, Shell, NWR. Nutrien is another example of a company that is the largest fertilizer producer in the world. They're producing ammonia, ammonium sulfate, urea in the region. Again, these are significant complexes, compete internationally on the international stage, and we're thrilled that the competitive advantage is there for them to operate and be profitable in our region.
It's maybe I'm going to follow you and just veer a little bit away from just pure hydrogen to talk maybe a bit about food and ag and the things that connect. Like, one of the things that we're seeing a lot of interest in is kind of that petrochemical sector, and whether it's fertilizer or biodiesel or other kind of biofuels. Can you just talk a little bit about maybe whether it's investments or what you see happening and what you see kind of as the future of that whole intersection of ag and energy?
Yeah, great question. And we are seeing more interest in biofuels and biodiesel and waste to fuels and waste to diesel type projects, and companies looking at these type of opportunities. And the underpinning competitive advantages that are in the region are what sort of position these types of next stage of investments, right? So, the rail access and the road infrastructure and the supply chain capability and maintenance skill set, and all of that comes with operating a facility here, all of that underpins these additional opportunities. And so, as the world is looking towards lower carbon opportunities, clean fuel standard regulations that are coming forward, that opens the door for these types of opportunities, whether it's sustainable aviation fuel or biodiesel or waste energy. All of these things become opportunities in the regulatory framework and the market framework where we're coming. We're heading into likely the market is moving where, the premium or just to get into the game of selling these types of products, you need to be low carbon. And so I think we're positioned well in the Industrial Heartland and in the Edmonton metropolitan region.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right.
Yeah.
Again, we only have a couple more minutes, so I'll ask you maybe just a couple questions. One of the things I think that's also, maybe it's just that, we love what we're doing here as a region, so maybe we think it's unique, maybe it isn't. But, when we talk to people from around the world about what's happening around talent, we've got more engineers per capita than any other place in Canada here in Alberta. The Edmonton in particular, the Edmonton region, is among the youngest of any jurisdiction in the country. We've got this young, educated workforce with tons of experience getting things done, getting things built. You look at the areas around Nisku, Leduc County, Atchison, which are all part of the region. It's the second largest fabrication, basically area in North America. I think there's one spot in around Texas that might have a little bit more. Like, this magic mix of all this stuff really feeds into it.
And that's all part of the value proposition. But what's great, as you're just describing, is it's all in proximity, right?
Yeah.
It's all in proximity. So if we look at from the Industrial Heartland standpoint, to have all of this great supporting capability, workforce, fabrication capability, supply chain, all of that within driving distance on a daily basis, whether it's about a half hour or 45 minutes, wherever you're living in the Edmonton metropolitan region or less, you can work in the Industrial Heartland and sleep in your bed every night. And that actually is an advantage. You're not dealing with a camp atmosphere or needed to build and manage a camp, and companies will understand the extra effort that is needed to build a large-scale value-add energy facility. You need to manage almost a small city in terms of a camp. You don't need to do that here. And that also is important for your workforce, work-life balance, building sustainable communities, all of those things. The proximity we have here in the Edmonton metropolitan region between this heavy industrial cluster and then all the supporting infrastructure and inputs to all these processes right here in the Edmonton metropolitan region, I think it's a great story.
Yeah, I totally agree. Again, the ability to send your kids off to school, mom and dad go to work, really good paying jobs.
Absolutely.
Get home, take your kids to hockey or soccer, and actually live a life and be able to afford to do it, both in terms of the income, and it's one of the most affordable places in the country to live.
Absolutely, it's really exciting to talk about, but that's all enabled by the competitive advantages here. Because if the competitive advantages weren't here, you don't have the economic opportunity for these projects to happen. But because we do, that just drives all this stuff. And the value proposition is here. I'm very, very optimistic about the future.
Yeah, love it. Again, low cost, low carbon, global scale,
You bet.
totally safe and secure, and a great place to live.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Mark, thanks so
Yeah.
much for joining us again. That's Mark Plamondon. He's the Executive Director of Alberta's Industrial Heartland Association, a key partner in the Edmonton region, and especially in the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub. So again, thanks so much for joining us, everyone. We're going to take a quick break to show a video of AIHA and what they're doing in hydrogen, and we'll be right back.